Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this hearing and the testimony of the witnesses. And I'd first turn to Mr. Litt, and if I remember in your opening statement, you made mention that there wasn't a restriction on foreign intelligence surveillance up prior to 1978 and the FISA court. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, there was no judicial involvement.
And I would submit that every nation that I know of does foreign surveillance, and I don't know of other nations that have judicial interference with the national security activity of foreign surveillance. And are you aware of any?
I can't speak for every nation, but I think generally speaking you're correct that other nations do not have their courts involved in foreign intelligence activities.
So we're relatively unique in that, and neither do I understand why we'd be concerned about the privacy or the, I'll say, the manufactured constitutional rights of foreign persons in foreign countries communicating with other foreign persons in foreign countries. I don't know why we'd worry about their privacy, and I don't know why we'd worry about their privacy if there's a nexus that might happen to be in the United States, provided it didn't interfere with the rights of a U.S. person. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think from the point of view of the Constitution, it's correct that, as the Deputy Attorney General said, that foreigners generally aren't protected by the Constitution. It's nonetheless true that we don't go out indiscriminately even as to foreigners. We only collect intelligence that has a valid foreign.
I understand the decency of the American people, but are we safer when we have judges deciding what we can surveil in foreign countries when they're foreign persons?
I think that we have found that the operation of FISA so far has allowed us to collect the foreign intelligence that we need to collect to protect the nation.
Yeah, I'm hearing that. Just another way of asking questions about this. The phone companies collect a lot of data, and it was mentioned that you'd like to keep that data for 5 years, the metadata, but some only keep it for a year and a half. If an agreement could be reached with the phone companies to maintain that data for a 5-year period of time, the duration that you request, wouldn't that be a firewall that would be more reliable than having to have the facility to store all that data? And certainly, Mr. Inglis.
Yes, sir. A reasonable question. I think that there are some challenges that could be overcome. The first is that those companies collect that data for their own business purposes, not necessarily for the governments. And so to rely upon what they hold themselves, there'd have to be some basis by which you could either compel them or have some confidence that over time.
Contractual agreement, perhaps?
Pardon, sir?
A contractual agreement, perhaps?
Contractual agreement, possibly some liability protection. I'll leave the legal framing of that to those who do statute and policy. Two, you'd have to have some confidence that you could efficiently, quickly query that data.
Sure.
And so if you had multiple providers, upwards of more than 2 providers, you would then run pillar to post querying that data.
Could I ask you to take a careful look at that and come back to me with really a serious reasoned answer? You give me a good answer so far. I'd just like you to dig into it.
Yes, sir, we will. So it turns out that the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and the Executive Branch have all asked us a question along those lines.
Curious.
We'd be happy to provide
okay.
those details.
Well, my clock is ticking down, but I'll stick with you, Mr. Inglis. Now, I'm just going to ask this question, and it's not really hypothetical, but pointed out this way. And I'm going to go through the list, so let's check on each one, and I'll come back if I need to. Do we have the ability to not necessarily listen in, but track every phone call in the United States? That's one question. Second one, do we have the ability to track any email in the United States? Do we have the ability to track website activity, any website activity in the United States? Do we have the ability to enter into active chat rooms and in real-time monitor? Do we have the ability to track any electronic credit or debit transactions, including the ATM transaction mentioned by the gentlelady from California? Do we have the ability to locate cell phones that are active? Do we have the ability to track GPS locators, whether they're on vehicles or other devices? And then I know my clock is running down, so I want to pour a little more in here. It's reported by the Obama campaign that they profiled voters with open source data and used that data to target voters for turnout and voter suppression. The IRS has used their search engine to target the president's political enemies. Now, if we can go this far, if all of these things are happening, if the answer is relatively yes to this list that I've given, then I would charge that it would be likely impossible to drive from Bangor, Maine to Los Angeles without leaving a data trail in this country. And all of these things can be justified by the Constitution, by statute, by case law. Am I close, and how would you respond to that big question?
Yes, sir. If the predicate to each of those 8 questions is in the U.S., and if the further predicate is can the NSA, the answer would be no to all of those questions. Is it technically feasible to do some of those things? Of course. And some of those things are, in fact, done by marketing organizations, by the telecommunications providers who attempt to determine the flow and the allocation of resource bandwidth to their resources. But the National Security Agency, as a foreign intelligence entity, lacks the authority and, frankly, lacks the collection to do the things that are on that list of 8 questions.
I'd look to drill into that a little deeper if I had the time, but thank you, and I'll yield back.
Sir, we'd be happy to take a visit at NSA or come down and talk to you in whatever detail you'd prefer.